Keanu Reeves was walking through the park, enjoying the warm afternoon sun as he made his way back home. The calm surroundings always offered him a break from the chaos of Hollywood. As a man known for his kindness and generosity, Keanu often found solace in the simple moments, but today something caught his eye that would forever change his life. Across the street, near a small bench, he saw a young boy standing alone. His clothes were worn, his face a mixture of confusion and sadness. The boy, no older than 6 or 7, held a leash in his hand. At the end of that leash was a dog, an adorable golden retriever, looking up at the boy with pleading eyes. Keanu hesitated for a moment, his curiosity piqued. What was this boy doing with his dog in a public park, looking as if he were trying to sell it? But the most puzzling part was the boy's demeanor. He wasn't shouting out to passersby or approaching anyone to make a deal. Instead, he stood there quietly, his eyes darting nervously as though he were waiting for someone. Keanu's heart sank. There was something deeply unsettling about the scene. It didn't seem right. This wasn't just any ordinary moment. It felt like a sign, like a call for help. He approached the boy cautiously, his footsteps silent on the pavement. As he drew closer, Keanu could see the boy was trembling slightly, his grip on the leash tight, but his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Hey there," Keanu said gently, crouching down to the boy's level. The boy startled, glancing up at Keanu with wide eyes. "Hey, it's okay," Keanu continued, giving him a warm smile. "What's going on? Why are you out here with your dog?" The boy shifted uneasily on his feet, looking at the ground, then at the dog, then back at Keanu. There was a long pause before he spoke, in a small, almost inaudible voice. I need to sell him," the boy said, barely looking Keanu in the eye. Keanu felt a pang in his chest. "Sell him? Why? This dog looks like your best friend." The boy hesitated again, his eyes filling with uncertainty. "I need the money. For my mom. She's sick. Really sick." The boy's voice cracked on the last word, his little hands shaking. As he clutched the leash tighter, Keanu stood up, his mind racing. He had heard the rumors about families struggling, about kids doing whatever they could to survive in rough neighborhoods, but seeing it firsthand hit him harder than he expected. What was this boy really facing? And why did he think selling his dog was the only way out? The more Keanu thought about it, the more he realized that this moment was about far more than just a dog. It was about hope, survival, and the desperate choices people sometimes have to make. Keanu's mind was made up. He couldn't walk away from this. But what was the best thing to do? What could one person, even someone as famous as Keanu Reeves, do to make a difference in this child's life? The question hung in the air as the dog whined softly, as if it too understood the gravity of the situation. What would you do? Keanu looked down at the boy, then at the dog, and made his decision. Before this moment was over, Keanu Reeves would do something that would shock not just the world, but change the course of the boy's life forever. But first, he needed to understand what had driven this young boy to such a desperate measure. Make sure to hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Keanu Reeves had always been a man of few words. His kindness and humility were well known in Hollywood, but very few people truly understood the depth of his character. Behind the stoic movie star was a man who had experienced his fair share of pain. Born to a working-class family in Toronto, Keanu had learned early on that life could be both beautiful and unforgiving. Growing up without a father, Keanu was raised by his mother, Patricia, who did everything she could to make sure he had a stable, loving home. She worked long hours, often at multiple jobs, to make ends meet, but she never let her son feel the burden of their struggles. Her strength, love, and resilience shaped Keanu into the person he was today. But when Keanu was just 23 years old, Patricia was diagnosed with leukemia. The cancer came on swiftly, and despite Keanu's best efforts to care for her, she passed away within a year. That loss, one of the most formative in Keanu's life, shaped his view on the world. It made him acutely aware of how fragile life could, but he learned that sometimes people just needed a little kindness. One small act of compassion could change everything. And so he made it his mission to do what he could to help others. Whether it was through charity work, anonymously donating money, or simply giving someone a listening ear when they needed it most. But today, Keanu wasn't just thinking about his own past. He was thinking about the little boy who had come into his life so unexpectedly, Marcus. The boy had looked so small and fragile, standing there with that leash, clutching it like it was his last lifeline. He had the same kind of desperate look in his eyes that Keanu had seen in his own reflection countless times during the years. He spent dealing with loss and hardship. Marcus was just 6 years old, too young to be dealing with the kind of stress and fear that the world was throwing at him. And yet here he was, standing in the park trying to sell his dog. Keanu hadn't known the full story then, but as he'd spoken to Marcus, a few things had started to click into place. Marcus didn't have a dad. His mum, a single parent, was gravely ill. She had been battling cancer for months, and the medical bills were piling up. Marcus, in his innocence, believed that selling his dog, his beloved pet, was the only way he could help. The dog was the only thing of value in their home, and Marcus was willing to part with it for his mother's sake. Keanu could hardly believe it. A 6-year-old boy was so caught up in his circumstances that he thought giving up his dog was the only option. It wasn't just about money, it was about survival. But no child should have to face something like this, let alone at such a young age. Keanu took a deep breath. He couldn't let this boy's story end like this. There had to be another way. While Keanu was deep in thought, Marcus stood quietly, beside him clutching the leash, his small hand trembling. The boy was trying to be brave, but Keanu could see the anxiety and confusion in his eyes. "Marcus," Keanu said, his voice soft but firm, "why don't you tell me about your mom? I'm sure she's an incredible woman." The boy looked up at Keanu, his eyes filling with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. He swallowed hard before answering. "Mom is the best," Marcus said quietly. "She takes care of me. She always tells me everything is going to be okay, but she's really sick. And we don't have enough money for the hospital. I thought, maybe if I sell Buddy?" His voice trailed off. Keanu's heart ached at the words. He couldn't imagine what Marcus had been going through, and yet here he was, a little boy trying to be strong for his mother. Buddy, the dog, was more than just a pet to Marcus. He was a source of comfort, a friend in a world that seemed too big and too scary for someone so young. And now Marcus was willing to give up his best friend for the chance to save his mum. Keanu kneeled down, his eyes level with Marcus's, and placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "Hey, Marcus," he said softly. "You don't have to do this. I want to help you and your mum. Let's find another way. You're not alone in this." Keanu could see the relief wash over Marcus's face, even though the boy still didn't fully understand what was happening. He wanted to help, but he also knew that he couldn't solve everything in one go. This was just the beginning of a much bigger story. A story that would require more than just money. It would take love, support, and a belief that good things could happen, even in the most dire of circumstances. Keanu stood up, looking around at the park and then at Marcus's face once more. "Why don't you come with me? I'll take care of Buddy and we'll figure this out. And we'll make sure your mom gets the help she needs. You're not alone in this, okay?" Marcus's eyes widened in disbelief, as if he couldn't believe someone was actually offering to help. "You'll really help?" the boy whispered, a small tear slipping down his cheek. Keanu smiled warmly. "Of course I will." As Keanu led Marcus and Buddy away from the park, he knew that this wasn't just a chance to help one child. This was his opportunity to make a real difference, to show Marcus and the world that kindness still had the power to change lives. And it wasn't just about the dog. It was about giving Marcus hope, a glimmer of light in what had to be one of the darkest times of his young life. What would you do? Keanu's heart was full as he thought about what lay ahead. This wasn't just a random encounter, it was fate. And Keanu wasn't about to let Marcus's story end with a painful sacrifice. The journey was just beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Keanu led Marcus and Buddy to his car, the golden retriever trotting beside them, his tail wagging despite the situation. The park, once a place of peaceful escape, had now become the backdrop to something much more profound. As they drove, Marcus sat quietly in the passenger seat, staring out the window. the weight of everything pressing down on him. He hadn't said much since Keanu had offered to help, but Keanu could tell the boy was processing it all in his own way. As they approached Keanu's house, Marcus seemed to snap out of his daze. He turned to Keanu, his small face filled with a mix of hope and worry. "You really think my mom's going to be okay?" he asked quietly, his voice breaking slightly. Keanu glanced at Marcus and gave him a reassuring smile. "I believe we can get her the help she needs, Marcus, but we have to be patient. It's going to take time, but we'll make it happen together." Marcus nodded, his eyes brightening just a little. "Thanks, Mr. Keanu." His voice was full of a kind of raw gratitude, the kind only a child could express so purely. Keanu parked the car in the driveway and led them both inside, where the warmth of the house contrasted sharply with the cold uncertainty that Marcus had been carrying with him. Keanu took a deep breath as he watched Marcus look around the room. It wasn't a grand house, just a simple, cozy place, but it felt safe. Keanu was determined to make sure Marcus felt that same safety, especially now. Buddy, the dog, wandered around, sniffing the surroundings as if trying to adjust to the new environment. Marcus seemed to relax a little when he saw Buddy exploring the house. "Want some water for you and Buddy?" Keanu asked, gesturing toward the kitchen. Marcus hesitated but then nodded, his mind clearly preoccupied. Keanu walked to the kitchen, but before he could grab the water, Marcus's voice stopped him. "Are you really going to help my mom?" Marcus asked again, his voice laced with a hint of fear. He wasn't sure if he could trust this kind stranger, even though Keanu had done nothing but show kindness. Keanu turned slowly, his expression serious, but kind. "I'm going to do everything I can to help her, but there are people who specialize in this kind of thing, Marcus. We'll find the right doctors, the right treatment, and we'll make sure your mom isn't alone." But the doubt in Marcus's eyes didn't fade. "Why are you doing this?" Marcus asked, his voice trembling slightly. "You don't even know me. I'm just a kid. You could have just walked away." Keanu paused. The question hung in the air, and for a moment he didn't know how to answer. He could tell Marcus was confused, uncertain about how anyone could care enough to help. Maybe this was the first time anyone had ever truly offered their help without asking for something in return. Keanu took a deep breath before answering, his voice calm and steady. "Sometimes we do things for people because we can, not because we have to. When I was your age, I had people help me when I needed it the most. Now it's my turn to pay it forward." Marcus looked down, processing the words, but the doubt still lingered in his eyes. As Keanu was about to hand Marcus the glass of water, his phone rang, cutting the moment short. It was a private number. He frowned, checking the caller ID. It wasn't anyone he recognized, but instinct told him it was something important. He stepped away from the boy to take the call. "Hello?" Keanu said, his tone guarded. "Keanu Reeves?" a stern voice on the other end of the line asked. "Yes, speaking," Keanu replied, a little puzzled. "My name is Dr. Barnes. I'm with the City Medical Center. I've just received a call about a patient named Jasmine Thompson. She's in urgent need of medical attention, and we have been told you're involved with her care. Is that correct?" Keanu's heart skipped a beat. This had to be Marcus's mother. He glanced over at Marcus, who was sitting quietly on the couch, still lost in thought. "Yes, I'm involved," Keanu said, trying to keep his voice steady. "What's going on?" Dr. Barnes's voice was tight with urgency. "Ms. Thompson's condition has worsened significantly in the last 24 hours. We need immediate treatment. The costs are astronomical, and unfortunately she's unable to afford the required treatment." Keanu's jaw tightened as he listened, his thoughts racing. He had promised Marcus that he would help, but now it seemed like the stakes were even higher. This wasn't just a matter of helping a child and his dog, it was about saving a life. "I'll see." "Handle it," Keanu said, his voice now firm with resolve. "Whatever it takes." Dr. Barnes hesitated, sensing the determination in Keanu's voice. "We can provide the care, but we need an immediate payment to begin the treatment. I'm afraid if we don't act fast, it might be too late." Keanu felt a pang in his chest. He wasn't prepared for this. He had assumed he would be able to make a difference with some charitable donations and quick fixes. But this wasn't just about money. It was a race against time. He ended the call, his mind spinning. He had to act, and fast. As Keanu turned back toward Marcus, he found the boy staring at him, waiting for some kind of sign, some indication that things would be okay. The hope in Marcus's eyes was almost too much to bear. Keanu had never felt such a heavy responsibility before, but now it was all on him. He walked over to Marcus, kneeling down in front of him. "I'm going to make sure your mum gets the treatment she needs," Keanu said, his voice full of conviction. "But we need to be strong, Marcus. There's no time to waste." Marcus nodded, his eyes wide with both fear and hope. "What do we do now?" Keanu stood up, wiping his hands together as he thought. "We're going to make some calls. We're going to find a way. I promise you, Marcus. We're going to fight this." But as Keanu looked out the window, something in the pit of his stomach told him that this was only the beginning of a much harder fight. The clock was ticking, and the journey ahead would be far from easy. But Keanu had made a promise, and he never broke his promises. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. The next few days were a whirlwind. Keanu spent his time scrambling to arrange everything, trying to gather the resources to help Marcus's mother. Every minute mattered, and the stakes were higher than he'd ever anticipated. He had no idea how difficult this journey would be, but as he sat at his kitchen table, his phone in hand, he realized that the hardest part wasn't going to be the money or the medical care. It was finding a way to hold everything together. Marcus was still staying at Keanu's house. The little boy had quickly become a part of the household, not just for Keanu, but for his friends who stopped by to check on them. Buddy, the dog, had bonded with the other animals Keanu had, giving Marcus a sense of normalcy in the midst of his turmoil. Keanu had made sure that Marcus always had someone to talk to, whether it was him, his housekeeper, or the few close friends who had offered their help. But despite the warm environment, the tension in the house was palpable. Every day, Marcus would ask, "Is Mom okay?" His face full of worry, he would constantly look at Keanu for reassurance, and every time Keanu had to say, "We're doing everything we can, Marcus." It was starting to take a toll on the boy, and it hurt to see him like this. The hardest part came when Keanu finally learned that the treatment Marcus's mum needed wasn't just costly, it was experimental, and the doctors were uncertain if it would even work. There were risks involved, and even if they managed to get the funds, there was a chance that Jasmine Thompson might not survive. Keanu stared at the report in his hands, the weight of it settling on his shoulders. It was far more complicated than he'd expected. It wasn't just money. It was hope. And that, Keanu realized, was something far more fragile than he had ever anticipated. As he read through the treatment plan again, Keanu's mind wandered to Marcus. The boy had no idea the odds were stacked against his mother. All he knew was that his mom was sick, and he was doing everything he could to fix it. "Keanu?" Marcus's small voice interrupted his thoughts. The boy was standing at the door of the kitchen, looking up at him with big, trusting eyes. "Is Mom gonna be okay?" Keanu put the papers down and sighed. This wasn't something he could sugarcoat, but it was something he had to handle delicately. "We're doing everything we can, Marcus," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "But sometimes we don't know how things will turn out. What I can promise you is that I'm not giving up, and neither should you." Marcus looked at him, his expression uncertain, but he nodded. He wasn't asking for promises that Keanu couldn't keep. He just wanted to believe that there was still a chance. The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls, fundraising, and meetings with doctors. Keanu found himself spending hours trying to coordinate everything, trying to figure out a way to bring the money together. But as the day wore on, he realized that time was running out. If they didn't get the treatment started soon, it might be too late. Jasmine's condition was deteriorating faster than anyone had anticipated, and the doctors were starting to prepare Marcus for the worst. Keanu was exhausted. His mind raced as he tried to think of a way to speed things up. Then, a thought crossed his mind. He could leverage his fame, his resources. He could make a public plea, put the word out to his fans, to anyone who would listen. If he could get people to rally behind Marcus and his mom, maybe they could raise enough to cover the treatment. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was their best shot. He sat down at his desk and began to compose a post. A video would be more personal, he thought. He could speak directly to his fans, tell them Marcus's story, and ask for help. He took a deep breath before pressing record on his camera. "Hi everyone, I'm Keanu Reeves, and I'm reaching out to you today with a request that is deeply personal to me," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "There's a young boy named Marcus, and his mother Jasmine is fighting for her life. She has cancer, and the only chance she has at survival is an experimental treatment that is extremely expensive. The hospital bills are beyond their means, and without this treatment, Jasmine's life is in jeopardy." Keanu paused, swallowing hard. "I know many of you have supported me over the years, and now I'm asking for your help. Marcus is a bright, kind kid who deserves to have his mum by his side. And Jasmine, she deserves a chance to live, to see her son grow up. We can make this happen together." Keanu took a deep breath, his voice becoming more resolute. "Please, if you can, donate anything you can to help this family. I believe in the power of community, and I believe that together we can make a difference. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this, and thank you for your support." He pressed stop, feeling a weight lift from his chest. He wasn't sure if it would work, but it was a shot. They didn't have time to waste, and if he could get the word out, maybe they could reach people who had the resources to help. The next few hours were a blur as Keanu watched the video go viral. Fans, friends, and strangers alike shared the post, offering donations, spreading the word, and sending messages of support. It was overwhelming, and for the first time in days, Keanu felt a flicker of hope. Later that evening, Keanu sat with Marcus in the living room, the boy now more at ease with the situation. Keanu showed him the donations that were starting to come in, and though Marcus couldn't fully grasp what was happening, the hope in his eyes was undeniable. "See, Marcus," Keanu said, smiling at the boy, "people care. We're not alone in this." Marcus looked at him wide-eyed. "So you think my mom's gonna be okay now?" Keanu nodded, feeling the weight of the promise in his chest. "I believe we can give her the chance she deserves, and we're not stopping until we do." But deep down, Keanu knew this was only the beginning. The treatment wasn't a guarantee, and there were still obstacles to overcome. But for the first time in days, Keanu felt like there was something worth fighting for. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. The days that followed were a whirlwind of hope, fear, and uncertainty. Keanu's video had gone viral, and donations were pouring in from all corners of the world. Strangers, fans, and even fellow celebrities had rallied together, showing support for Marcus and his mother, Jasmine. The generosity was overwhelming, but with every donation came the realization that no amount of money could fully guarantee a happy ending. Marcus had been by Keanu's side every step of the way. The boy was quieter than usual, spending most of his time sitting in the corner of the living room, clutching Buddy close. It was as though the reality of his mother's condition had hit him in waves. Sometimes he'd be optimistic, his eyes lighting up when he saw the growing amount of funds, but other times a deep sadness would cloud his face. Keanu couldn't help but feel the weight of it all. He had promised Marcus he'd help, but the truth was, no one knew if Jasmine would survive, even with the treatment. The doctors had warned him that there was still a risk, that the experimental therapy might not work. It was a gamble, one that only time would reveal the outcome for. As the week progressed, Keanu found himself on the phone constantly, coordinating logistics, setting up appointments, and contacting specialists who could help. But each conversation left him feeling more drained than the last. No matter how many promises were made, the uncertainty lingered like a cloud. It wasn't until late one evening that things took an unexpected turn. Keanu had just finished dinner when he received a call from Dr. Barnes. His heart skipped when he saw the hospital's name on the screen. With everything happening so fast, Keanu had almost forgotten about the pending updates. He immediately picked up the phone. "Keanu, I have some news about Jasmine," Dr. Barnes said, his voice tense. "We've managed to secure a spot for her in the treatment program, but there's something we need to discuss." Keanu's heart sank. He already knew this was going to be hard. "What is it?" Keanu asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "We've received a call from the experimental treatment team," Dr. Barnes continued. They've informed us that Jasmine's condition has worsened over the last 48 hours. The window for this treatment is closing quickly, and we need to act fast. If she doesn't start the treatment immediately, we might miss the chance completely. But even if we do start the treatment, there are no guarantees. Keanu felt the air leave his lungs. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about saving a life, about taking a leap into the unknown, not knowing if it would all come together in time. "How soon can we start?" Keanu asked, his voice urgent but steady. "We're moving her to the treatment facility tomorrow morning," Dr. Barnes said. "But we need your consent before we can begin." Keanu hung up the phone and walked out into the living room, his mind racing. Marcus was sitting on the couch, staring at his phone, but when he saw Keanu's face, he immediately sensed that something was wrong. "Keanu?" Marcus's small voice broke the silence. "What's going on?" Keanu looked at the boy, his heart heavy with the weight of the moment. He sat down beside him, trying to find the right words. "Marcus," Keanu said softly, "the doctors have a chance to start the treatment tomorrow. But we don't know what's going to happen. There's a risk. We can't be sure if it'll work." Marcus swallowed hard, his face pale. "So, what do we do?" Keanu's heart broke at the uncertainty in Marcus's voice. This wasn't the way any child should have to learn about life's unpredictability. The pain of watching someone so young have to face such hard truths was unbearable. "We take the chance," Keanu said firmly, though his own heart was in turmoil. "We give your mum the opportunity to fight. No matter what happens, Marcus, we don't give up on her. We give her the chance she deserves." Marcus looked up at Keanu, his eyes filled with tears. He had been holding it all in, his fears, his hopes, his doubt, but now in the quiet of Keanu's home he allowed himself to break down. Keanu reached out and pulled him into a hug, not knowing how much comfort his embrace would bring, but knowing that it was all he could offer in that moment. "Do you think Mum will get better?" Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. Keanu pulled back slightly to look at him, and for the first time he saw the depth of Marcus's fear. It was raw, it was real, and it was too much for a little boy to carry. But Keanu knew that all he could do was hold on to hope. "I believe in miracles, Marcus, and I believe that your mom is strong. We're going to fight with everything we've got." The words felt hollow even as they left his mouth, but Keanu couldn't bring himself to say anything else. The truth was, they were both walking into the unknown. But they weren't walking alone. As they sat in the dim light of the living room, Marcus curled up next to Keanu, his head resting on his shoulder. Keanu let his thoughts drift, focusing on what they could control, the next step. They had raised the money, they had found the doctors, and now it was time for action. But the weight of it all, the pressure of the unknown, threatened to overwhelm him. The emotional strain was unlike anything Keanu had ever faced. He wasn't just helping a family anymore. He was holding their entire future in his hands. The hours passed slowly, and when the morning arrived, Keanu felt a sense of resolve settle over him. Today would be the beginning of something they couldn't predict. But whatever happened, he had made a promise to Marcus. And promises, especially to children, had to be kept. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. The day that followed was a blur of hospital rooms, paperwork, and uncertain waiting. Keanu stood by Jasmine's bedside as the doctors prepped her for the experimental treatment. It was a fragile moment, the kind where you could almost feel time standing still. The room was filled with a mix of hope and fear, and despite all the medical equipment and buzzing machines, it felt like everything in that sterile space depended on the one decision Keanu had made to push forward. Marcus was not allowed to be with his mother during the preparation, and Keanu couldn't help but feel the weight of the boy's absence. The child had remained strong so far, but Keanu could see the cracks beginning to show. His fears were written on his face whenever he looked at the door to the treatment room, his small hands nervously clasped together. Keanu walked over to Marcus, who had been sitting in the waiting area. The boy had been so quiet, his face drawn with worry. Keanu knelt beside him, trying to offer a smile, but the weight of the situation felt like a heavy stone on his chest. There were no guarantees, no assurances, only the quiet hope that somehow, against all odds, things would work out. "Marcus, we've done everything we can," Keanu said softly, brushing a lock of hair from the boy's forehead. "Now, we just need to trust that your mum will fight. And you can be proud of yourself for helping her get this far." Marcus nodded, but his eyes were clouded with doubt. What if it doesn't work, Keanu? What if Mom? His voice trailed off as the fear finally broke through. Keanu exhaled, slowly, pulling the boy into a tight hug. "I know you're scared, Marcus, I am too, but sometimes we have to trust, and no matter what happens, we'll get through it together. You're not alone in this, okay?" Marcus clung to him, his small body trembling. "Okay, Keanu, I trust you." And in that moment, Keanu realized something that he had been too afraid to admit to himself. Marcus had already placed his trust in him. The little boy was looking to him not just for support, but for strength. It was a burden that no one should have to carry, but Keanu knew that if he faltered now, Marcus's world would collapse. After a long and tense wait, the doctors finally returned with an update. Jasmine had been successfully prepped for the treatment, and they were starting the procedure immediately. There was still no guarantee it would work, but the doctors were hopeful. That small glimmer of hope was enough to keep them moving forward. As Keanu and Marcus sat together in the waiting room, the hours seemed to stretch on endlessly. Every second felt like an eternity, but Keanu remained by Marcus's side, holding the boy's hand, reassuring him that they were doing everything they could. It was the kind of moment where the passing time became irrelevant. All that mattered was the now, the present. And in the present, Keanu had made a promise to Marcus, one that he intended to keep. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, the doctor returned. His face was somber, but not without a faint sense of relief. "Jasmine's condition is stable for now," the doctor said. "We've started the treatment, and we'll monitor her closely over the next 48 hours. There's still a long road ahead, but this is the best chance she has." Keanu breathed a sigh of relief, though the weight of the situation still loomed heavy. They weren't out of the woods yet, but at least they had a fighting chance. As the doctor left, Keanu turned to Marcus, whose eyes were wide with a mixture of anxiety and hope. Keanu smiled softly, trying to give the boy the assurance he needed. "Your Mom is fighting, Marcus, and we're going to keep fighting right beside her. We won't stop." Marcus nodded slowly, his face still full of worry, but now with a glimmer of hope behind his eyes. "Thank you, Keanu. I knew you'd help. I just wanted Mom to be okay." Keanu leaned down and kissed Marcus on the top of the head. "You're welcome, kiddo. We all want that." The next few days were filled with quiet moments and small victories. Jasmine remained stable, and though there were still no guarantees, the progress was a sign that the treatment was working. Keanu continued to stay by Marcus's side, offering support in every way he could. But there was a shift. The weight of uncertainty was still there, but Keanu saw Marcus begin to trust, to believe that things could get better. It was a slow process, but Keanu could see the boy starting to find some peace, and that in itself was a victory. The road ahead was still long, but Keanu had learned something during this journey that he would never forget. It wasn't just about money or fame or even the power of social media. It was about the power of love and commitment, the ability to fight for someone you care about, even when the outcome is unknown, and the importance of keeping hope alive, even in the darkest times. Keanu spent the next few months alongside Marcus and his mother, supporting them through the ups and downs. Slowly but surely, Jasmine began to show signs of improvement. The EIT experimental treatment was working, perhaps not as quickly as they had hoped, but it was working, and in the end that was all that mattered. Marcus would always remember this time in his life, the uncertainty, the fear, but also the love and the commitment Keanu had shown him. It was a love that transcended bloodlines, a love that had no boundaries, and in the end, that was the greatest gift Keanu could ever give him. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. The journey wasn't over, but the end was in sight. Jasmine's recovery was progressing steadily, albeit slowly, and there was a sense of cautious optimism that had started to replace the earlier uncertainty. Marcus, though still grappling with his fears, was beginning to find his footing again, as the weight of the unknown started to lift, replaced with the relief of seeing his mother slowly return to herself. She still had a long road ahead, but they were getting there. Keanu couldn't help but reflect on how much he had changed through all of this. The experience had taught him lessons he hadn't expected to learn: the importance of family, the strength of community, and the power of human connection had taken on new meanings in his life. What started as a moment of tragedy for Marcus and his mother had turned into something else entirely, a testament to the power of compassion and the extraordinary ways in which people can come together to support one another. The phone calls, the media attention, the constant stream of donations, all of it had helped, of course. But it was the people, the real human connections, that had made the difference. Fans who had never met Marcus or his mother had become like family, supporting them with their kindness and generosity. It reminded Keanu that, in a world that often feels divided, it's the small acts of kindness that hold the most weight. As Marcus and Keanu sat in the living room one evening, playing a game of cards, there was a sense of normalcy that had returned, one they hadn't had in so long. The world outside might still be uncertain, but for this moment inside Keanu's home, everything felt right. "Keanu," Marcus said, breaking the silence between their laughter, "what do you think will happen next?" Keanu paused, considering the question. "What do you mean?" Marcus looked up at him, his expression thoughtful for a moment. "I mean, after all this, after Mom gets better and everything goes back to normal, what happens next?" Keanu leaned back in his chair, his mind drifting to the bigger picture. "Well, Marcus," he began, "life doesn't always go the way we expect, but that's part of the journey. We just have to keep moving forward no matter what. Sometimes we get knocked down, but the important thing is that we stand back up. You've done that already. You've shown so much strength." Marcus smiled slightly. "I'm not sure I'm as strong as you, Keanu." Keanu chuckled softly. "Trust me, kid. You're stronger than you think. You've been through a lot, and you're handling it all better than most adults would." The boy's smile grew wider at the compliment, but it was clear he still didn't fully understand the weight of his own strength. He would learn, though, just as Keanu had learned through all of this. Life was about more than just surviving. It was about learning, growing, and finding your own path, even in the face of adversity. Over the next few weeks, Jasmine continued her recovery, and the three of them formed an even tighter bond. Keanu had become a part of their family, and while it was still a strange feeling for him to be so deeply involved in their lives, it had become clear that his role in their journey wasn't just that of a benefactor or celebrity. He had become their friend, their ally, their support, and that in many ways was far more important than anything else. One evening, as Keanu sat at the kitchen table, looking over some paperwork, Marcus came up to him. He had a small envelope in his hand. "Keanu, I wanted to give you this," Marcus said, his voice sincere. "I've been saving up my allowance, and I thought maybe you could use it for something good. For helping other people, like you helped us." Keanu looked at the envelope in surprise. Inside there were a few crumpled bills and coins. A small amount, but it was a gesture that meant more to him than anything money could buy. "Marcus," Keanu said softly, his heart swelling with emotion, "you don't have to do this. You've already given me so much just by being part of this journey with me." The boy looked up at him, his eyes shining with determination. "I know, but I want to. You showed me what it means to help people, and I want to do the same." Keanu smiled deeply, touched by the boy's generosity. It was a reminder that despite all the hardship, the world was still filled with good people, good hearts, and that sometimes the smallest actions had the most profound impact. As the days turned into weeks, Keanu continued to be a part of Marcus and Jasmine's lives, watching them both grow stronger with each passing day. Marcus was back at school, making new friends, and slowly regaining the carefree attitude of a child. Jasmine, though still recovering, was getting stronger each day. And while there were still challenges ahead, the family was healing, together, indoor. The end, Keanu knew that he hadn't just changed their lives, they had changed his as well. They had reminded him of the things that truly mattered, the power of connection, the importance of love, and the strength that can be found in the most unexpected places. As for Marcus, he had learned that even when life feels impossible, there is always hope, always a way forward. And he would carry that lesson with him, no matter where life took him next. What about you? If you were in Marcus's shoes, what would you do? Would you have the courage to keep fighting, even when things seemed hopeless? Share your thoughts with us in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on more heartwarming stories like this one.